Everyone expected Jasmine Crockett to stay quiet. Instead, she stood up, locked eyes with Trump, and called him out directly, unapologetically. He lost his cool. While the room stiffened, Melania slipped out, silent and expressionless. It was the kind of night designed to dazzle. The estate's grand facade rose behind thick white columns, each one glowing from below like a Roman temple. Neatly lined black SUVs disappeared behind manicured hedges. Inside, the main ballroom shimmered crystal. Chandeliers overhead, soft jazz floating through the air, and enough champagne to flood a yacht Palm Beach new luxury. But this wasn't a typical donor soiree filled with polite flattery and clinking glasses. This was a strategic fundraiser. The guest list was tight, RSVPs heavily vetted. Every handshake, every side glance whispered of political maneuvers and campaign chess moves. Trump's team had orchestrated the evening with military discipline. Only the most loyal, the richest, the most influential were allowed past the front gates. Tech billionaires mingled with former senators. Celebrities floated through, hungry for relevance. And Melania, radiant in a silver gown that clung elegantly to her frame, sat just to Trump's right, offering that distant smile that never quite met her eyes. Then, without ceremony, Jasmine Crockett entered. No entourage, no fanfare, just presence. Her dark emerald dress was sharp-shouldered and perfectly elegant, understated. Heads turned not in recognition but confusion. A woman by the bar, dripping in diamonds, leaned toward her husband. "Is that one of the moderators from MSNBC?" He shrugged. Jasmine didn't flinch. She knew exactly why she was there. From Trump's inner circle had sent the invitation, perhaps as a gesture, perhaps a dare. Her presence made the room appear open-minded, democratic. But no one expected her to actually come. Certainly not like this. She didn't schmooze. She didn't pose for selfies or slap backs with the donors. She walked calmly to the third table on the left and sat, sipping water, scanning the room like she was reading it line by line at the podium. An aide shuffled papers as Trump worked the room. He moved from table to table, grinning, shaking hands, collecting praise. One man with a heavy gold watch called him a warrior. Another compared his last rally speech to Churchill. Trump soaked it in, but the air had tension beneath the gloss. It's the kind of tension that doesn't scream, but simmers in glances, forced laughs. The extra second before a smile, Jasmine felt it immediately. It intensified when a woman in a blood red dress passed by near the restrooms, whispering something sharp. Jasmine caught it. She didn't react. First course arrived, grilled scallops on white porcelain. Conversation sparked across the tables, polite and practiced. Jasmine didn't touch. Her plate, she watched. 2 tables ahead, the woman in red had joined her husband and was now laughing too loudly at something Trump said. It was a laugh meant to be noticed. Jasmine leaned back, still quiet, still observing. A former oil exec at her table turned toward her. "Glad to see a fresh face," he said, voice smooth with a Texas drawl. "Didn't expect you here, I'll admit." She met his eyes. "That makes 2 of us." He chuckled, trying to soften the moment. "We all want what's best for the country," he offered. "Just different roads to get there." She gave a polite smile, but didn't reply. That line was always bait. Across the room, Trump finally stepped up to the mic. The jazz faded, cutlery stilled, heads turned. He tapped the mic twice. "Good evening, friends, patriots, real Americans." Scattered applause. "We're winning," he declared. "They don't like it. The media doesn't like it. But that's too bad." Applause swelled. Jasmine didn't move. They're tired of lies. Tired of whining. Tired of being told they're racist just for existing. The line landed heavy. Jasmine blinked once. He smiled wider. He didn't say her name. Oh, he didn't have to. "I'll say it plainly," he continued. "This country doesn't need more victims. It needs victors. People who work, people who don't cry every time someone disagrees with them." Now heads turned. Several looked right at Jasmine. A man across from her cleared his throat, glanced down at his lap. Even the staff pouring wine began to move more cautiously. Trump raised his glass. "We don't need lectures. We need leadership. And all of you, you're the reason this country still stands. Not because you complain, because you build. More applause, though not universal. Melania shifted slightly in her chair. Jasmine leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced. Then Trump did something he hadn't done in any recent speech. He veered off script. You know, he said, stepping away from the podium, I keep hearing that I'm offensive, that I scare people. He paused. I scare people because I tell the truth. They say I don't respect women, and Jasmine stood. Please, Trump said, letting the words stretch with practiced ease. I've done more for women than most of these so-called activists. His eyes swept the room confident, rehearsed then paused, just for a beat on Jasmine. I don't care what color you are. You work hard. You love this country. You're welcome. But don't stand there and pretend America is the problem. It's what losers do. The words landed with a thud, not because of what was said, but how. No fire. No real conviction. It's just theater. Performance. Jasmine had seen it before. The bait, the test. Across the room, the woman in red turned to her husband, whispered something, and he smirked. Melania slowly folded her napkin, laying it in her lap with care. Her face didn't change, but her fingers tensed around the edge of the table. Trump continued, but the air had shifted. His voice suddenly felt louder than the room. Some guests clapped right on cue. Others stayed still, unsure now, watching, calculating. Jasmine didn't blink, didn't flinch, but something clicked. She hadn't planned to speak. Still, she felt it, a quiet thrum deep in her chest. Not anger, not pride, just a voice inside whispering, say something, but not yet. The room needed to hear a few more things. First, things it wouldn't forget. Dinner moved on, but barely anyone touched their plates. Forks hovered. Glasses were filled, sipped once, left sweating. Trump hit full campaign stride now, pacing the floor, script forgotten. He railed about inflation, about China, about the invasion at the border, and then, with a smirk, real women, he said, are tired of being spoken for by activists with angry haircuts and no real jobs. That one got a laugh forced, mostly from the second table of men. Jasmine sat still, shoulders square, lips pressed tight. She had heard worse from smaller men. But what stung wasn't the insult, it was the ease of it, the smug comfort. Way the room wrapped itself around his voice like it belonged to them all. Like no one here expected to be challenged. 2 seats down, a man leaned in, voice low. You don't have to stay for this, he said. If I were you, I'd walk out. Jasmine turned to him, calm, steady. I know you would, and then she stood. Not loud, not dramatic, just deliberate. Her chair didn't scrape, her napkin remained folded on the plate. But her rising, silent as it was, spoke louder than anything else in that ballroom. Heads turned. Not all, but enough. Trump paused, mid-sentence, brows raised, amused. Congresswoman Crockett, he said, drawing out the title like a smirk. Did I say something too real for you? A few laughs followed, nervous, on autopilot. Jasmine didn't respond right away. She stepped toward the edge of her table, not advancing, just centering herself, her gaze locked with his. No, she said. Not too real, just too empty.
Silence.
Dense Trump raised his eyebrows, feigning surprise. Oh, we've got a fighter in? The room, the laughter returned, but weaker this time. Jasmine's voice was even clear. I wasn't going to speak tonight. You know that? I was invited and I came. I sat here. I listened. I gave this room respect event when it wasn't returned. No shouting, no theatrics. She didn't need them. But since you brought me into your speech, I'll answer. You say America needs victors, not victims. Fine. But you speak like the two are always separate, like no victor has ever come from survival. She paused. The room listened. Some of the most successful people in this country built it while carrying wounds people like you never had to feel. A sharp breath somewhere. Near the back, Trump gave a thin chuckle, but his eyes didn't match. You're trying to turn this into a pity party, he said. You're good at that. Jasmine didn't blink. You call it a pity party. I call it lived experience. And I'm not here to make anyone comfortable. I'm here to tell the truth. She let the moment settle, then turned, scanning the room. Said you've done more for women than activists? I've heard how you talk about women. We've all heard the tapes. Some of you just pretend not to. A murmur rippled through the guests. Sharp and dry like wind through brittle grass, Trump opened his mouth, but she kept going. You brag about not seeing color, but every time you speak, there's a target. And it's never the one sitting here writing six-figure checks. Now, she faced them. The donors, the influencers. Not accusing. Just naming. I came tonight hoping there was still room for truth in a place like this. Not spin, not performance, just truth. A beat passed, her voice dropped, steady. And tonight that. Truth is simple. Some of you are clapping for things you don't even believe. You're just scared to lose your seat at the table. Silence. Trump stood frozen. No smirk. No comeback. Across the room, Melania glanced up, her expression unreadable, but her eyes locked onto Jasmine. And Jasmine. She sat down slowly, gracefully. Her final words before taking her seat. You don't scare me. You never did. But Trump wasn't done. He never let someone else own the last word. He leaned forward, gripping the podium with both hands. The showman mask slipped. The room felt heavier now, charged with something darker. He opened his mouth slowly, like he might show restraint. But it didn't last. Double quotes. Oh, I scare you just fine, he snapped. His voice cut sharper now. You walked into a room you don't belong in and tried to give me a lecture. That's not courage, sweetheart. That's theater. Psst, mostly. Younger staff near the back. One server nearly dropped a tray. Jasmine didn't react. She stared at him with a stillness that made people shift in their chairs. Her silence was louder than his insult. But Trump pushed on, voice rising. You think you can stand there and scold me like I'm your student? I built this movement? Rebuilt this country from the wreckage people like you left behind? He jabbed. A finger toward her. You don't know sacrifice. You've never built anything. You've lived off government checks and outrage. Someone in the back muttered, Jesus, under their breath. Melania shifted slowly this time. Her lips tightened. She leaned in, whispered something in his ear. He didn't respond, didn't blink. His focus was locked on Jasmine like she was a threat that wouldn't retreat. Finally, she spoke. You finished? Trump raised his chin, trying to reclaim dominance. Go ahead. Say whatever you came to say. She stood again. No rush, no theatrics, just presence. This time her voice was louder, clear enough for the staff in the back to hear. You talk about building things, she said, but all I see is wreckage. Families torn apart, faith in institutions shattered, children afraid to go to school, women afraid of losing rights they thought were guaranteed. She paused, let the silence settle. You didn't build a movement, you built a brand. A brand that sells fear, paranoia, and the idea that truth is just whatever gets the loudest applause. Trump crossed his arms, jaw tight. He was waiting her out, hoping to regain the room, but she didn't give it back. You say I'm performing? Let me tell you what's real. Real is watching a mother sob outside a courthouse because her son got 20 years for something a rich man would have walked away from. Real is sitting with survivors who can't explain to their daughters why men in power keep getting away with everything. Then she added so plainly it cut deeper, and what's also real is the look on your wife's face right now. The room collectively turned. Melania's expression didn't change. But she looked away for the first time that night down at her folded hands. Jasmine didn't press it. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause could have been. Trump's voice rose again, raw now. It's no longer in control. You came here for a viral moment, he barked, and I gave it to you. You're welcome. She tilted her head, calm, steady. If you think this is about a clip, you've already lost. It's because people in this room heard me even if they won't admit it yet. Trump's jaw flexed. Jasmine leaned slightly toward the mic, and one day they will. From the back, a single clap. It's an older woman, white hair, pearl earrings, clapped once. Loud in the hush. She stopped when her husband touched her elbow. Trump tried to pivot, trembling now about crime in liberal cities, media conspiracies, but it didn't land. The air was gone. He was yelling into a void. No one was fully listening anymore. They were watching. Watching her. Watching him lose the room. Word by word. Watching Melania, who now looked like she was quietly counting the minutes until this was over, and beyond them other. Faces were shifting. Donors, advisors, guests with influence. They weren't all looking at Jasmine with dismissal anymore. Some looked at her with something closer to respect. For a moment, the only sound was the faint rattle of ice in a glass. The room wasn't frozen. It was stunned. Trump inhaled sharply through his nose. His face, normally locked in that familiar stage-ready scowl, had turned a deeper red. Not the showman's red, but the kind that comes when someone can feel power slipping away. Then came the outburst. "You know what the problem is?" he shouted, stepping away from the podium now. "People like you walk into rooms like this, rooms built by winners, and you think being angry is enough. You think just showing up with a chip on your shoulder makes you right." But his voice no longer echoed like it used to, because the room slowly, quietly was no longer his. His finger jabbed at the air, not at anyone in particular, just swinging in frantic circles, desperate for direction. His voice boomed, but it didn't feel strong. It felt like panic disguised as power. "I've made billion-dollar deals," Trump shouted. "I've been on top of the world. I've rebuilt industries. I don't need a lecture from someone who got lucky off outrage and Twitter followers." The word outrage echoed, sharp as a slap. Bouncing off the chandeliers and paneled walls, Melania reached out, placed her hand gently on his wrist. "Donald," she said, this time firmer. "Enough." He pulled away, didn't look at her. That single rejection said more than any tirade. Around the room, even some of the loyal began to shift in their seats. At a side table, a man in a tan suit with an oil company pin leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered. Jasmine didn't stand. She didn't need to. Her silence now weighed more than any speech, but Trump pressed forward, almost breathless. "You call me a brand? You're damn right I'm a brand. A brand that pulled this country out of Obama's miss out of the weak, pandering leadership that bowed to every so-called victim group." The air quotes were loud. The insult landed poorly. More people stared down at their plates. Some exchanged quiet glances. The electricity in the room was flickering, replaced by discomfort, tension, dread. "I'm not here to make you feel good," Trump barked, eyes locked on Jasmine. "I'm here to win. And if you think truth matters more than winning, you've already lost." That line didn't land the way he wanted. Near the buffet, someone scoffed. Jasmine turned to face him, not with anger, not even amusement, just calm. And then she asked evenly, "Is that what you tell yourself when you lie?" A sharp intake of breath rippled across the room. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Trump pointed a shaking hand.
"This is what you all want, right?"
he yelled. "Her. She insults a president, and you clap for her." For a moment, silence. Then came the unexpected. A single clap. Then another. From the back, not from staff, a man near the piano, mid-40s, golf tan, dark blazer, clapped slowly. He didn't look at Trump. He looked at Jasmine. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rebellious. It was honest. Trump saw it. "That's enough." He snapped. "Anyone who doesn't respect this platform, this legacy, can leave." No one moved, not a soul. And then Melania stood. Not quickly, not dramatically, just deliberately. She didn't speak. She didn't look at him. She turned and walked out of the room with the same grace she'd entered. Each click of her heels sounded like punctuation. Trump stopped mid-sentence somehow. That her silence hit harder than anything Jasmine had said near the wall. A staffer leaned toward his mic and whispered into a headset, "We might need to wrap early." No one said it aloud, but the truth settled over the room like smoke. The illusion had shattered. The emperor was still shouting, but his voice no longer carried. Jasmine remained in her seat, not smug, not triumphant, just grounded. present, unshaken. But the night wasn't over. Because even as Trump unraveled, other faces in the room began to see her differently, not as an intruder, but as a force. Some would find her before they left. As Melania disappeared through the side corridor, the room exhaled. No one followed her. No one dared. Trump stood frozen. One hand clutched the podium, its expression unreadable, caught between disbelief and a quiet fury that had nowhere to land. He didn't speak again. A moment later, someone near the front tried to lighten the mood, raised a spoon, tapped it gently against a glass. The sound died in the air. No toast followed. Jasmine stayed seated, still and composed. Then came the whispers. They moved like wind across tall grass, soft, quick, spreading. Did you see Melania leave? She didn't even say a word. I've never seen him like that. That woman, what's her name again? Jasmine didn't catch every word, but she heard the shift in tone. The eyes on her now weren't the polite dismissals from earlier. They were sharper, curious, respectful. At one table, a woman in her late 30s, cropped blonde hair, tailored navy dress, an expensive watch leaned toward her companion and murmured she was the only adult in the room. Then she stood, walked across the room toward Jasmine, offered a hand and a quiet, composed smile. I'm Delaney Foster, she said softly. That was brave, Delaney said. Jasmine stood, shook her hand firmly. Thanks. Delaney smirked. That wasn't the plan. The best things never are, she replied. Others followed, not many, just enough to notice. One by one, they approached Jasmine not loudly, not for attention. Just quiet gestures, a handshake, a nod, a few honest words. I've been waiting for someone to say that. You said what some of us think but are too scared to admit. Thank you for not backing down. No one made a scene, but the current had shifted. Could feel it in the pauses, the lowered voices, the way people lingered longer than they meant to. From across the room, an older man in a navy suit someone Jasmine recognized from a tense congressional hearing watched her carefully. He didn't approach. Not yet. But he was paying attention. Nearby, a political consultant leaned into her assistant's ear. Keep an eye on her. She won't be background much longer. At the main table, Trump had returned to his seat, shoulders slightly hunched, jaw tight, chewing the inside of his cheek. The laughter around him had stopped. A few still tried to keep the mood alive, but their smiles were stiff, too wide, too practiced. His team hovered close, unsure whether to end the evening or pretend the crash never happened. In the hallway, a staffer spoke quietly into a radio. He's done. Prep the car. Then came Silvio Breton, longtime donor, quiet, influential, known for saying very little but meaning every word. He stepped to Jasmine's table. No handshake, just a look. A slow nod took guts, he said. Jasmine looked up. I didn't come here to grandstand. He shrugged. Didn't feel like a performance. Felt like truth, in a room that forgot what it sounds like. Then he walked away. She sat again, hands relaxed. The room hadn't erupted. No cheers, no applause. Ow. But something had cracked. Something meaningful. The donors who stayed quiet tonight would remember the moment Trump unraveled. Jasmine didn't flinch. They'd remember when Melania stood up and left without saying a word. They'd remember who spoke, who said nothing at all. Jasmine reached for her water. Still cold, she took a sip, but before she could finish, someone approached someone she hadn't expected. A voice from behind, gentle yet unyielding. May I speak with you? Melania and Trump stood there, composed, elegant as ever, but up close, Jasmine noticed something else. A weariness. It's not exhaustion, exactly something older, deeper. Maybe it had always been there, hidden behind perfect posture and camera smiles. Jasmine rose. Of course. They walked slowly toward a side hallway, quiet, dim, lined with oil paintings.
Oh.
They stopped near a narrow alcove, away from the ballroom's echo. Melania spoke first. I don't talk much at these things. You've probably noticed. Jasmine didn't answer. She let her go on, but tonight, Melania paused. Tonight was different. Her gaze met Jasmine's, eyes darker than they appeared in photos. I've been in rooms like that for a long time, she said quietly. They're built to silence people like you. Jasmine blinked, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. Melania continued, voice low, steady. I learned to survive. By watching, by staying quiet. But sometimes, silence poisons the soul. No emotion crossed her face, but her words hit hard. I can't fix him, she added, barely audible. But I can still choose what I stand next to. Jasmine nodded. You leaving that room said more than most speeches tonight? Melanian's lips twitched, not quite a smile. It's not quite sadness. I don't expect sympathy, she said. I just wanted you to know. I heard you. I wasn't the only one. Before Jasmine could respond, Melania turned. Walked away. Her heels echoed softly down the polished hallway, and just like that, she was gone. Jasmine stood for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. It wasn't support. Not exactly, but it was something real. When she re-entered the ballroom, the atmosphere had changed. The crowd had thinned. Wine glasses sat half-drunk. Conversations had grown shallow, scattered. Trump had left, no farewell, no wave. Just a silent exit flanked by 2 aides and a waiting car. But Jasmine, she was still standing. A few guests lingered nearby, pretending to mingle. But their eyes kept drifting her way, curious, calculating, some even respectful. No one said much. Not yet. That would come later. Behind closed doors, when the right people started asking, who was she and what comes next? Over private phone calls and whispered lunches, the murmurs began. Not immediately, phones weren't allowed inside. No footage, no live stream. The press stayed in the dark, but word of mouth has a way of slipping through cracks. Within 24 hours, anonymous leaks from a donor at the Palm Beach. Fundraiser began making the rounds in newsrooms. Some stories painted Jasmine as disruptive. Others called her poised, unshakable under pressure. But the truth always leaks. Someone always talks, and this time it wasn't just reporters, it was the donors. Not all of them, just a few. But a few was enough. A few took mental notes that would later steer conversations in boardrooms. Us. A few quietly began to wonder just how stable Trump's grip still was. One of them, a hedge fund manager in San Diego, sent Jasmine's team a short, subjectless email the next morning. You weren't wrong. Respect. Jasmine didn't post about the event, didn't give interviews. She let the silence work for her, and it did. Within a week, her name was circulating among political strategists in D.C. not as a fringe voice, but as someone worth watching, someone who didn't flinch, someone who made power uncomfortable in a room where that wasn't supposed to happen. But none of that mattered to Jasmine. At that night, what mattered was that the truth had been spoken, out loud, and the world didn't end. In fact, it might have shifted just a little. By the time most of the guests had filtered through the estate's grand archways, only a small cluster remained. Too polite or too intrigued to leave just yet, Jasmine stayed seated, hands folded, his eyes quietly scanning what remained. A few familiar faces passed her table. Politicians, power brokers. None stopped, but their expressions had changed. They didn't look through her anymore. They looked at her. No smiles. Just acknowledgement. Then she noticed someone by the side entrance. Not a donor, not a staffer, not dressed like either. Gray. Sports coat, no tie, collar open. He had the casual posture of someone who'd been around money long enough not to prove it. He walked toward her table and paused. Mind if I sit a second? Jasmine gestured. You already are. He chuckled. Touché. He sat, glanced around the nearly empty room, then leaned forward slightly. I've worked behind the curtain for over 20 years. Campaigns, optics, crisis control. I've seen a lot of moments that felt big. Most aren't. And tonight, she asked. He hesitated. Tonight was different. Not because of what you said, but because of how he reacted. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. You didn't take the bait, he said. He tries to turn people into caricatures. He gets loud, they get louder, he wins. But you didn't bite. Jasmine took a sip of water, eyes on him. Why are you really talking to me? He smiled. Because I'm tired of sitting in rooms where everyone's too scared to say something real. He paused, voice softening. Tonight, you didn't just speak, you stayed. That matters. There was a beat of silence. Honest, not tense. You don't need my advice, he added, but for what it's worth, don't walk away from this moment. Don't downplay it either. People are looking for someone who knows how to stand still while everything else collapses. He stood, adjusted his jacket, met her eyes. Use it. And then he walked away. Jasmine didn't move. She replayed his words not because they flattered her, but because they echoed something she'd already been grappling with. Speaking up is one thing. Holding your ground afterward, that's something else. Just as she was about to leave, someone else approached. An older woman. Tall, poised, a deep green scarf wrapped elegantly at her neck. She looked like someone who sat on for non-profit boards and chaired at least one art foundation. You don't know me, the woman began. But I've been in politics longer than you've been voting. Jasmine offered a polite nod. Then I'd be smart to listen. The woman smiled faintly. I was 2 tables behind you tonight. I've watched that man tear into journalists, senators, even donors. But I've never seen anyone stop him cold. Not like that. She glanced toward the now empty podium. You reminded me what it looks like when someone doesn't flinch. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, Jasmine replied. That's why you did. Her voice cracked slightly, just enough to reveal that honesty wasn't easy for her, not in public. It's not like this. She touched Jasmine's shoulder gently. Don't let them tell you it wasn't a moment. And with that, she walked away. Outside, a black car idled quietly, waiting. Jasmine gathered her things without rush, without drama, and stepped through the double doors into the thick Florida night. The air was warm, but softer than expected. She paused, glanced back at the mansion behind her. All that marble and money, it looked smaller now, like something had cracked inside it, like its illusion of control had finally buckled under truth. She slid into the car. Back to the hotel, ma'am? The driver asked. She didn't answer right away. Then softly, no, take the long way, because some nights don't end when the doors close. Some need room to settle, to sink in, to remind you that standing your ground isn't where the applause ends, it's where the next choice begins. The next morning, there was no official statement, no press release, no spin from Trump's team. Not yet, but silence. But when it comes from the powerful, is louder than any headline. Inside the political ecosystem, phones lit up with encrypted messages. Those who hadn't been there were already pinging those who had. Did it really happen like that? Did he really lose it in front of everyone? And Hersha just stood there? Some insiders tried to soften it. He was tired. She ambushed him. It wasn't that serious. But none of it stuck, because too many people had felt the shift. And once something shifts like that, it doesn't snap back. By midday, a single photo surfaced on social media, grainy, probably snapped by a waiter or junior staffer. Jasmine, mid-sentence. Trump across from her, visibly flushed. The caption read, she didn't raise her voice. He couldn't lower his. It was shared over 600,000 times in 10 hours. Cable news stayed cautious. They knew better than to provoke Trump without cover. The whispers grew teeth. Op-EDS started circulating. They didn't name names. They didn't have to. They asked about temperament, about control, about leadership. And Jasmine, she said nothing. No tweets, no talk shows. She let her silence say it all, and somehow it made her voice even louder. Back in D.C., her name surfaced in meetings on both sides of the aisle. Not because anyone had flipped on policy, but because she had done what no one else had in years. She cracked the armor in closed rooms. Donors who once sat shoulder to shoulder with Trump's circle now whispered different questions. Is he slipping? He didn't look strong. He looked rattled. Others asked about her, her background, her record, her story, not to praise her, to assess the risk of underestimating her, and Melania. She didn't say a word, but the way she exited that night silent, without a backward glance, became its own headline. Clips of her departure ran on loop. Late night shows turned it into sketches. No punchlines. Just silence. A journalist from The Atlantic published a piece titled, "The Woman Who Didn't Yell," and still took the room. Jasmine read it once, then closed her laptop and returned to her notes. She didn't want the story to become about ego. She wanted it to stay rooted in truth. Later that week, she visited a middle school in Akron, Ohio. No cameras, no press. Just a quiet event on reading and mentorship. A young girl with braids and thick glasses raised her hand. "Is it scary?" she asked. "To speak when people don't want you to?" Jasmine smiled gently. "It can be," she said. "But what's scarier is letting other people decide what's okay to say." The teachers in the room said nothing. They didn't need to. They understood. Not long after, an email appeared in her inbox from a former Republican strategist she'd never met. One sentence. "Don't let this moment pass without using it." She replied with 2 words, "I won't." Still, Jasmine knew the spotlight wouldn't last. Something louder would come, a scandal, a viral moment, a manufactured crisis. That's how the cycle worked. But she also knew something else. This time, people had watched more closely, and not just her supporters. In politics, most shifts happen behind velvet curtains over wine and whispered bets. But now and then, the curtain lifts just long enough for someone new to step into the light. But Jasmine wasn't thinking about the spotlight. She was thinking about the rooms that still waited to be entered. Rooms where truth still made people uncomfortable, where silence had reigned for too long. A week later, she sat in her DC office. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, striping her desk in quiet gold. Outside, the usual hum of the Capitol stirred. Inside, she turned a page in her notes and kept going. Shuffling papers, interns walking too fast, aides speaking too quietly. Jasmine glanced at the stack of mail piled in the corner, some from supporters, others from strangers. Most were handwritten. At the top, one envelope stood out, plain, unmarked. She opened it. Inside was a single card, cream-colored, no name, no return address. Just 10 simple words in neat, deliberate handwriting. "You didn't speak for effect. You spoke for truth." She held it for a long moment. Not because it praised her, but because it reminded her how rare that kind of truth was in the rooms. She moved through, rooms thick with posture and performance, where being heard often meant being loud, where silence was mistaken for weakness. Decency was often edited out. But that night in Palm Beach had shifted something. Not just in the public's eyes, in hers. In the hours and days that followed, she realized something she hadn't put into words before. Power doesn't always wear a podium or a raised voice. Sometimes it looks like staying calm, especially when every instinct tells you to fight back. Trump had entered that ballroom certain no one would challenge him. Not there. Not on that night. Not in front of donors, cameras, and chandeliers dripping gold. But she did. Not with fire. Not with insult. Just truth, measured, steady, unmistakable. And when he cracked, it wasn't because she shouted louder. It was because she refused to play his game. That was the lesson. The one that outlasted headlines and retweets. The truth doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. And dignity held firmly can pierce through noise better than any shout ever could. Later that month, she stood on a national stage, a university town hall, polished floor, bright lights, cameras rolling. The host introduced her as the woman who made a room of power fall silent. She smiled politely because that moment wasn't her story. It was just a chapter. A student in the crowd asked, "If you could go back and change anything about that night, would you?" She paused, thoughtful. "I wouldn't change a word," she said. "But I do wish I'd said it sooner." Clapped not wildly, but steadily. People weren't cheering a spectacle. They were affirming something deeper. She had been heard. She didn't need to go viral again. She needed to keep going. Keep telling the truth. Even when it made others uncomfortable, especially then, not every room would welcome her voice. That was never the point. The point was showing up anyway, speaking anyway, staying calm when others unraveled, holding the line when others ducked. For cover, because people don't just listen to what you say, they watch how you say it. And when power pushes back, how you stand in that moment that says everything. She stood. And now people knew she would again. Maybe that's the real lesson. When you speak truth into a room that was never built for it, it doesn't vanish. It echoes. It sticks. Sometimes it sparks something you can't take back. So if you're watching this now, if you're wondering whether your voice matters, whether it's worth speaking in a space that wasn't made for a year, remember this: you don't need to match their volume. You just need to hold your ground. And when the moment comes, don't wait for permission. Speak calmly. Speak clearly. Speak truthfully. Then let the silence that follows do the work. If this story moved you, share it with someone who's been quiet for too long. And if you believe in holding power accountable, no matter who's in the room, subscribe for more stories that speak truth without shouting.